Elizabeth of Aragon, also known as Elizabeth of Portugal, T.O.S.F, was Queen Consort of Portugal, a tertiary of the Franciscan Order, and is venerated as a saint of the Roman Catholic Church. Family and early life. Born in 1271 into the royal house of Aragon, Elizabeth was the daughter of Infante Peter and his wife Constance of Sicily, and the sister of three kings, Alfonso II and James II of Aragon and Frederick III of Sicily. Elizabeth showed an early enthusiasm for her faith. She said the full divine office daily, fasted and did other penance, as well as attended twice daily choral masses. Religious fervor was common in her family, as she could count several members of her family who were already venerated as saints. The most notable example is her great-aunt, Saint Elizabeth of Hungary, after whom she was named. Marriage. Her marriage to King Denis of Portugal was arranged in 1281 when she was 10 years old, receiving the towns of Obidos, Abrantes and Porto de Emos as part of her dowry. It was only in 1288 that the wedding was celebrated, when Denis was 26 years old, while Elizabeth was 17. Denis, a poet and statesman, was known as the Rey Lavrador because he planted a large pine forest near Llerena to prevent the soil degradation that threatened the region. Elizabeth quietly pursued the regular religious practices of her youth and was devoted to the poor and sick. Naturally, such a life was a reproach to many around her and caused ill will in some quarters. Eventually, her prayer and patience succeeded in converting her husband, who had been leading a sinful life. Elizabeth took an active interest in Portuguese politics and was a decisive conciliator during the negotiations concerning the Treaty of Alcañices, signed by Denis and Sancho IV of Castile in 1297. In 1304, the Queen and Denis returned to Spain to arbitrate between Fernando IV of Castile and James II of Aragon, brother of Elizabeth. She had two children, a daughter named Constance, who married King Ferdinand IV of Castile, of son Afonso. Elizabeth would serve as intermediary between her husband and Afonso. During the civil war between 1322 and 1324, the Infante greatly resented the king, whom he accused of favoring the king's illegitimate son, Afonso Sanchez. Repulsed to a link which supported the Infante, Denis was prevented from killing his son through the intervention of the Queen. As legend holds, in 1323, Elizabeth, mounted on a mule, positioned herself between both opposing armies on the field of Alvalade in order to prevent the combat. Peace returned in 1324, once the illegitimate son was sent into exile, and the Infante swore loyalty to the king. Dowager Queen. After Denis' death in 1325, Elizabeth retired to the monastery of the Poor Clare nuns, now known as the Monastery of Santa Clara of Vella in Coimbra. She joined the Third Order of St. Francis, devoting the rest of her life to the poor and sick in obscurity. During the Great Famine in 1293, she donated flour from her cellars to the starving in Coimbra, but was also known for modest in her dress, humble in conversation, habit to provide lodging for pilgrims, distributing small gifts, paying the dowries of poor girls, educating the children of poor nobles, and was a benefactor of various hospitals and of religious projects, such as the Trinity Convent in Lisbon, chapels in Llerena and Obidos, and the cloister in Alcobaça. She was called to act once more as a peacemaker in 1336, when Afonso IV marched his troops against King Alfonso XI of Castile, to whom he had married his daughter Maria, and who had neglected and ill-treated her. In spite of age and weakness, the Queen Dowager insisted on hurrying to Estamos, where the two kings' armies were drawn up. She again stopped the fighting and caused terms of peace to be arranged. but the exertion brought on her final illness. As soon as her mission was completed, she took to her bed with a fever from which she died on the 4th of July, in the castle of Estamos. She earned the title of peacemaker on account of her efficacy in solving disputes. Although Dennis' tomb was located in Odivelas, Elizabeth was buried in the convent of Santa Clara in Coimbra, in a magnificent Gothic sarcophagus. After frequent flooding by the Mondego River in the 17th century, the Porclares moved her mortal remains to the monastery of Santa Clara Nova. Her body was transferred to the main chapel, where it was buried in a sarcophagus of silver and crystal. Sainthood. She was beatified in 1526 and canonized by Pope Urban VIII on the 25th of May 1625. Her feast was inserted in the general Roman calendar for celebration on 4 July. In the year 1694, Pope Innocent XII moved her feast to the 8th of July, so it would not conflict with the celebration of the octave of Saints Peter and Paul, Apostles. In 1955, Pope Pius XII abolished this octave. The 1962 Roman Missal changed the rank of the feast from double to third-class feast. The 1969 revision of the calendar classified the celebration as an optional memorial and restored it to the 4th of July. Her feast is also kept on the Franciscan calendar of saints. Since the establishment in 1819 of the Diocese of San Cristobal de la Laguna, Saint Elizabeth is the co-patron of the diocese and of its cathedral pursuant to the papal bull issued by Pope Pius VII. Iconography. Saint Elizabeth is usually depicted in royal garb with a dove or an olive branch. Popular culture. She was the subject of a 1947 Portuguese-Spanish film The Holy Queen, in which she was played by Marucci Fresno. Ancestry. Bibliography.